interesting story coming out of Toronto today, or yesterday, or a couple days ago. Jewish student sues over toxic anti-Semitic working environment at Toronto Metropolitan University. A Jewish student is suing, saying a toxic anti-Semitic learning and working environment exists. Nicole SUES, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, identified in a statement of claim filed at the Ontario Superior Court, is seeking $1.3 million in damages against the university. But interestingly enough, SUERS's claims are what many Jewish students have experienced on campus before. Specifically, SUERS talks about the university's inadequate response to global events affecting the Jewish community, such as violent attacks. Nicole suggests that the university failed to publicly address or condemn these incidents, which is contributing to a sense of insecurity. There are a series of campus events and activities that promote anti-Semitic rhetoric and create a hostile working and learning environment for Jewish students. And Nicole says that when she complained of this and when complaints were made, they were either dismissed or they did not take appropriate action. Okay, so I can tell you, I went to university here in Toronto, and there were many protests in support of Palestine, Palestinian liberation, that also included a lot of criticism about the government of Israel. Hidden within those protests, and I would walk through these to get to class, I would argue were definitely some that were making anti-Semitic remarks. I remember there were pamphlets about like the Jewish conspiracy and things like that, and people would say things. And again, I would just walk by, at the time I didn't know enough about it, but there were what I would consider anti-Semitic remarks that were being made by not everybody, obviously, but by some within the protest. And this is the kind of like strange space that this happens in because, excuse me, there's a protest about the government of Israel's actions towards Palestinians in the West Bank and other parts of the Middle East. But some people equate the actions of Israel as representing the Jewish community because Israel is an ethno-national state. Very similarly, it's like how some people characterize, Muslim people all are, Al-Qaeda supporters, ISIS supporters, Taliban supporters. I mean, when ISIS was ramping up, there were comments about Muslims, supporting ISIS and things of that nature, similar to 9/11. Again, it wasn't the majority at all, but there were comments people were making online and in person about Muslims, this is a representation of their religion, warring religion, fighting religion. That's what I've noticed very similarly with people equating what Israel is doing with the entire Jewish community. And what's interesting too is that Nicole's experience is not alone, is not individual or singular. I remember reading this report, the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, Campus Anti-Semitism. This is back in 2006, and this is by the United States government United States Commission on Civil Rights. And what's interesting about this report, it's 76 pages long. I made some notes somewhere. But the report talks about very similar instances. So here's an example. The report talks about hostility and intimidation of Jewish students on campus, specifically at Columbia, San Francisco State, and the University of California, had very specific instances, very similar to Nicole's. The university responses, so when Jewish students would come forward with criticisms of what's happening, these would be dismissed, very similar to Nicole's. The impact on the emotional and psychological well-being of students also very well documented. And then the call to action that, there needs to be training for staff on what's happening on campus. So very interesting that back in 2006, the U.S. government also found very similar instances. And again, it's not just that study. There are other studies. There's this one study. Let's see if I can find it. I just had it up. Here we go. particularism in the university, realities and opportunities for Jewish life on campus. And this goes into a lot of detail about the what Jewish students have experienced on campus. And what's really interesting is, again, it's very similar. So we know that there are instances happening on campus protests where there's anti-Semitism. The question is, what do you do about it from the university's perspective? So a Jewish student comes forward and says, "Hey, I saw Jewish conspiracy flyers being passed out. This is so anti-Semitic. What is the university going to do about it?" Okay, so as much as universities train their staff, if someone doesn't feel like they're being listened to, they're gonna feel like the university's not doing enough. Does that make sense? It's like, if I come forward to someone who's not brown and I tell them, "Hey, I experienced racism. This person made a disparaging comment about me, et cetera, et cetera." If you're not brown, if you're not from an underrepresented group, it's quite easy to dismiss that, and not dismiss it outright, but to not understand the impact of that might have on me. Now, I've never done that before. I've experienced people making crass remarks, but not like racism. But similarly, if a Jewish student were to come to me and tell me about, they saw someone said, there's a Jewish conspiracy, I'd be like, "Man, that's fucked up. That's messed up." I wouldn't be able to fully understand that person. I could try my best, but really, because I'm not from that community, it'd be really hard. And Ryerson University was formerly called Ryerson. It's now called Toronto Metropolitan University. When they say they want to train their staff, what can you really train your staff to do that'll make that student feel that their concerns are being heard? Right? Like, you can give them a book, be like, "Okay, if this happens, do this, that, and the other." It's like, "Okay, I'm following." Like, again, a Jewish student comes to me, they say, "Christopher, I experienced racism. There was this Jewish conspiracy pamphlet being passed around." Okay, I'm going to open up this book with a list of action items for me to do to respond to your concern. Now, roles reversed. If I'm the student, I'm only looking at Christopher. His head is down in a book, or like flipping the pages furiously to get to the anti-Semitism section. I'm gonna feel like this. Does this guy, like, I'm a human being? Does this guy understand that, like, there's some serious stuff happening on campus? To be honest, I don't think you can train someone to understand someone else's experience. It's hard. It's a psychological intervention. I think the better thing is to tell staff to listen to students. Just listen, document everything, listen, and provide support, and ask students what they would like to see. Now, that may be very bold, but it could be one way. And the action has to be as dramatic as it would be for other types of racist actions on campus. It can't be, "Well, we do it for this group and not that group." That lends itself to this uniform experience by Jewish students in America, or in the United States and in Canada. So I don't know if you can train staff on anti-Semitism. I think the better thing is to let staff listen, document everything, and review with other guidance counselors, other staff. Be like, "Listen, this was brought up. I am bringing it up here. I don't know what to do. This person's clearly distraught. There was an incident. We as a university have to come together and figure this out." Now, the question that I've always asked myself is, I've never seen a group on campus that has received as much, I don't want to say acceptable, but I will. I haven't seen a group on campus that has seen that as much acceptable racism, anti-Semitism, as Jewish people. Does that make sense? Like, I've never seen an anti-Black protest, or sorry, a protest against Black students, and mixed within there was anti-Black racism and racist sentiments that were shared. I've never seen an anti-South Asian, anti-Asian anti-X protest where there were racist remarks towards the South Asian community or Asian community. But I have seen that with the Jewish community on campus in both universities that I attended. And that's not unique to me. That's not unique to Nicole. That is an experience that I'm sure many students have at least seen or heard. A pro-Palestinian protest, maybe for all the right reasons, but mixed in, there is anti-Semitism. There are anti-Semitic remarks. And so the question we have to ask ourselves is, at what stage do we start saying this is actually a problem? And this goes back to, the Claudine Gay testimonial before Congress as well. It's like the downplaying and the undermining of the Jewish student experience is, in fact, a common experience that Jewish students go to the administration, they say, hey, by the way, this is what's happening, and they just feel like nothing's getting done. It's not one-off. It's not like it happened in a couple instances. This is happening across universities and colleges, Canada, United States. This is what's happening. So the question remains is what we do about it. The first is we have to start talking about it openly, and we have to be able to discuss this in an open way. There's actually currently a class action lawsuit against 3 universities here in Toronto as well about this same topic. I'll try to find that. But I think it's talking about it and normalizing talking about it. It's not about us versus them and Jew versus Muslim and, well, this group experiences racism too, and nobody talks about that. I mean, it turns into this whole, Spider-Man meme, well, but you. It's like, no, we have to normalize the experience of what Jewish students are experiencing on campus. And I think the best way to do that is talk about it in a very open manner and have more people come out saying like, hey, I also have noticed this as well. So let me know in the comment section below. Have you noticed this on campus where you go to university and college? Let me know, because I do think that this is a very common experience. I'd love to hear what you think, and also what you think universities and colleges should do to combat, if combat's the right word, or address anti-Semitism on campus. Let me know.